Usually on day 2, we start bleeding people. I look around the room and I think everyone is here, including some of our colleagues who've been here since Tuesday, who came in for the RAP conference. So welcome. If you're new, welcome, welcome. We have a number of our funding and government partners in the room. I want to extend a special welcome to you and a thank you for continuing to walk in partnership with our sector and supporting the important work that we do in helping to support immigrants and refugees who have decided to call Canada their home. So thank you. A reminder that all sessions in this room, including our opening plenary, is conducted in both official language. If you are not bilingual in both languages, please pick up a headset out the door to your right. You no longer have to leave ID, just pick them up, and at the end of the session, just drop them back on that table. So we encourage you to speak in one of the official language. And now back to 50-50. I see Carolina walking around with bags with red handles. Carolina's fling that around higher. Please buy a ticket. 1 ticket for $5, 5 tickets for $20. The draw will be this afternoon. You must be in the room with your ticket to win. We will also be raffling off a lovely art piece that's being created as we speak. And of course, some other smaller gifts like these beautiful plants you're seeing here. So buy a raffle tickets. You're either going to go home richer than when you come, or you'll go home with a lovely art piece or some beautiful flowers for your home or office. Okay, end of commercial. Okay. I will speak slowly as my colleagues make their way with their food to their tables. We had over 500 people register for this conference. 493 showed up. It's a huge conference. We have another couple of hundred people online. And we have a wait list. I think it speaks to the commitment of those many of us who work in our sector. Our provincial, municipal, and federal colleagues are also here with us. Okay. Bienvenue. I am going to start singing if I don't get your attention, and I really don't know how to sing.
Likeness or likeness?
Likeness. So, as though it were, yeah, as though it were English word.
I'm a wannabe many things. I'm a wannabe filmmaker. I'm a wannabe lawyer. Our corporate lawyer from time to time will say, Debbie, I know that makes logical sense, but it's not law.
That's why,
So the bar is not very high. The bar is on the ground.
Okay, our panelists are having way too much fun, so let's get them serious. It is a great pleasure. Okay, if you can hear my voice, clap once. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times. I stole that from one of my daycare teacher's friends. It works every time. Our grandson loves it. It is my great pleasure to welcome panelists to the stage for our second plenary, Are We at the Breaking Point? Poverty, Backlash, and the Fight for Equity. Refugees and immigrants face growing poverty and rising hostility amid economic uncertainty. Many of you have seen the latest polls that were recently released. Racism and xenophobia is also on the rise. Is Canada's consensus on immigration fading? How do policies like Bill C2, C12, the Stronger Borders Act, reflect this shift? Our panelists will share insights on the anti-immigrant backlash, its ties to economic strain, and how the sector can respond. In the second half, participants, you, will discuss strategies to push back while building solidarity, advocating for systemic change. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Charles Smith, our project lead of the Canadian Network for Equity and Racial Justice, who will be moderating this panel today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the panelists.
Thank you, Debbie, and wonderful to be here. I'm Charles of the three, and I have these two wonderful and engaged speakers, Lila Sarangi and Jordan Leichnitz, here with me today. We're going to do this in a very interesting way. One is, Debbie's already read out the focus for the day, and so that's really the focus that we want to really dig in on. But each of the speakers will speak for about 5 to 7 minutes. And after they're done, I will pose 3 questions to you. And at your tables, you'll have about 10 minutes at your tables to speak with each other about your response to those questions, or if you have other questions you think we should be asking. And after that 10 minutes, you see the microphones in the middle of the room. Please come to the microphones from your table. Hopefully there won't be that greater rush, but if there is a greater rush, be gentle with each other in getting there. And say what you have discussed at your table. You'll also notice at your table you have some sticky pads with the good old Sharpies that you can write down some of your comments. And those are really important too, because we're just trying to get, we're all various ways have expertise that we want to bring together and share, especially in this moment that we are in, where the title of the session, Solidarity and Vision in Action, is so appropriate, timely, necessary, and urgent. So we want to get as many voices as we can. If you have a comment that you want to put on the sticky, on your sticky, then put it on one of the flip charts that are over here, and those will be collected as part of the report out on the conference and a way of thinking of how we go forward in around this time. So if that's okay, I'm going to turn to Lila first. Lila, as you can see, just quickly her title, she is a Senior Director, Strategy and Innovation at Family Services Toronto, and she will start off and will be followed by Jordan, who is the Canada Director, Frederick Ebert Foundation and Broadbent Leadership Fellow. Lila?
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. I'm Layla Sarangi with Family Service Toronto. My role there in strategy and innovation is really about bringing community voices and all kinds of partners together to shape the services that we provide, making sure that they're accessible and available and that we are mission and values focused in our work. We provide services, some of you may know, we provide services to people with developmental disabilities, people affected by gender-based violence, and people with mental health needs. We've been in operation for over 110 years. We've had to iterate over the years, but we have a very central focus on social justice issues and advancing systemic change. And that's really where my portfolio is, taking all of the relationships and knowledge that we're gaining from our work and translating that into progressive public policies and working with communities to advance those policies. So part of my role, I serve as the National Director for Campaign 2000, which is a pan-Canadian coalition of over 120 organizations in every province and territory. And the mission is to end child and family poverty. We came about in response to a 1989 unanimous federal resolution that passed in the House of Commons that Mr. Broadbent had brought this motion forward. He was the leader of the NDP at the time. It was the last motion he brought forward into the House. Everybody voted for it. And the goal was to end child poverty by the year 2000. And so now 25 years after that goal, 1.4 million children in our country lives in poverty. The research that we do with the coalition and Family Service Toronto, one thing I want to underscore, because part of the conversation is what can we as service providers do to build solidarity and address poverty. Family Service Toronto backbones this coalition. As an organization, as part of their commitment to systems change, they have built into our staffing positions this support for this coalition work so we can continue to advocate and convene and mobilize on poverty eradication. We put out annual report cards. We've been doing this for over 30 years. We track, monitor, and report on the state of poverty in Canada. And what we found in our latest report card, and this will not be a surprise probably to anybody in this room, but in the 2 years post-pandemic, we saw skyrocketing rates of poverty like we haven't seen before. We met our federal poverty reduction goals in the pandemic years, and after that, when the supports to families and individuals expired, we saw poverty skyrocket. Almost 360,000 children fell into poverty in those 2 years post-pandemic alone. So are huge increases. And right now, 6.5 million people live in poverty in Canada. As poverty rates are skyrocketing, the depth of poverty is also increasing. So what that means is families have less annual incomes. They have less ability to meet their daily needs. We have a cost of living crisis. On average, families' incomes are falling $14,000 below the poverty line. Single moms with 2 kids have this highest gap. They need $16,000 a year more just to bring them up to the poverty line. That's over 1,000 hours of minimum wage work to close that gap. We don't have accessible childcare. We don't have decent housing. Reports this week from Statistics Canada showed that food continues to rise. The price of food is rising at double the rate of overall inflation. So the situation is dire. As poverty rises, as income inequality deepens, wealth continues to concentrate at the top. So our research has also found that families in the top 10% of the income spectrum have 18 times more income than those at the bottom end of that spectrum. And that gap, we track it year over year, it's widening. Now we know, and that groups who are represented or overrepresented in these statistics are the people who we are serving. They are those who are disproportionately affected by colonization, racism, marginalization, immigrants, newcomers, migrants, those who have precarious immigration status or who are undocumented face all kinds of barriers to entering the labor market. They face rights violations, recent reports on stolen wages, unsafe working and unsafe living conditions. They often can't access their legal, social, health services or income supports. And this is why they're overrepresented in our poverty statistics. But you know this deeply. I don't need to tell you about the barriers because these are the things that you are addressing in your daily work. These folks, they are us. They are our families, they're our loved ones, they're our friends, they're our neighbors, and they are our community members. We know them well. And in this context of poverty and inequality and economic anxiety, it gives rise to anti-immigrant sentiment. Debbie mentioned the poll this morning. It showed 58% of Canadians think immigration is too high. That's the highest attitude we've seen in 25 years. Immigrants, we know, are increasingly scapegoated for housing shortages, job competitions, and strained public services. A more recent poll showed that attitudes towards immigration falls clearly along political lines. 82% of Conservative Party supporters say there's too much immigration, compared to 40% Liberal supporters and 30% of New Democrats. And that's the widest partisan gap on record since the 70s. These attitudes, they get baked right into policy and legislation, such as Bill C-2, the Strong Borders Act, and that restricts immigration, gives more power to immigration authorities, tightens asylum rules, and expands surveillance. So we have to remain vigilant. We, as social service agencies, there is a lot that we can do. I am looking forward to the conversation about how we get involved. This is my jam. This is what I love to do, is work with this sector to organize and mobilize. And I will just end with this quote, because for me, it really reflects what we can do in this time of these crisis, these existential crises. It's from Eleanor Roosevelt, actually. She said, "Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small, they cannot be seen on any map of the world." So they begin with us. They begin internally and in our relationships and in the services we provide. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Over to you, Jordan.
Thank you so much, Leila, and thank you for having me here today. It's a great pleasure to be here. So I'm here today wearing a few hats. In my day job, I work with the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, which is a German political foundation that works with progressives. So doing this work has given me a lot of exposure to trends in anti-immigrant sentiment that are happening in Europe. And I want to share some of the things that we've observed there. But I'm also a recovering political staffer. So I spent 10 years on Parliament Hill. I worked with Jack Layton and 3 other leaders of the New Democratic Party. And it's like the Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never really leave. So one of the other things that I'd like to share a little bit today is some visuals to bring into focus the trends that Leila was talking about. And also some learnings that come from research and ground level organizing about how to reach people who hold anti-immigrant sentiments. What works to bring people back into a more pro-immigration space based on the research? And then hopefully that will kick us off for a good discussion. So this is a chart you have likely seen before. As Leila said, we are at a 30-year low for support in immigration in Canada right now, and this is a very recent change. Almost all of this shift in opinion has occurred over the last 3 years, and the biggest change happened between 2022 and 2024. And we've arrived at a point now where in some surveys, up to 3/4 of Canadians support reducing immigration levels. And importantly, immigration is now rising to the top of issues of concerns for Canadians when they're asked in surveys what they're worried about. So right now, you're seeing about 1/4 of Canadians put it in their top 3 national issues. And when you think about all the challenges that Canadians are experiencing right now with cost of living, with housing, the fact that people are putting immigration as a top challenge is a significant change. This is data that comes from a report that we commissioned, a national survey earlier this year. And we asked respondents across the country to rank, in their view, their priority about what type of immigration they feel is most valuable for Canada. And I know it's a lot of text, so I'll just say, you can see here that clearly there is a lot of interest and acceptance in the idea of workers with specialized skills coming to support specific sectors of the economy. There remains really strong support for family reunification. There is support for refugee resettlement. Where we start to get into lower levels of support and prioritization are temporary workers, entrepreneurs, interestingly, and investors. And lastly, international students have by far the lowest level of support among the Canadian public. So a clear hierarchy of how Canadians think about those different streams of immigration when you present it in plain language to them. And why are people expressing anti-immigrant sentiment? So if you ask Canadians, what is it that makes you concerned about immigration? They're going to generally tell you 2 things. They're going to talk about housing. That is the #1 driver of concern about immigration in Canada. And the second thing they're going to say is that they have a sense that the government is not managing immigration correctly, that it is in some way out of the government's control. That's a really common narrative that we hear in the research right now. A relatively small minority of people will overtly cite racial reasons for their anti-immigrant sentiment, which I think is a really important piece. All that said, there is still really, really high recognition. We're talking above 80% for the contribution that newcomers make to the Canadian economy. People understand that immigration is essential to our economic future. And people are generally pretty optimistic about the capacity of newcomers to integrate successfully into Canada. So there's a bit of a balance in that those negative trends. We also still see positive information. But as Leila correctly said, one of the new things that's emerged is that this has become a highly partisan conversation in Canada. And this is a new shift. So 25 years ago, there was a strong consensus across party lines in favor of immigration. This divide is now the largest that's been recorded since the 70s, and this is a major feature of partisan affiliation. And when we see that 82% number of Conservative voters who think there is too much immigration in Canada, we have to remember more than 8 million people voted Conservative in the last federal election. There is a lot of people in that bright red bar there who need to be won back into a more pro-immigration consensus. And the reasons that they may be more receptive to those anti-immigration messages often seem to be going back to those economic concerns. So when we look at what's happened in Europe, and I'm sure many of you are familiar about the way the issue of migration and immigration has scrambled European politics over the last 10 years, there are a few lessons to be drawn. So we can see that public opinion on immigration can shift very rapidly. In Europe, in Germany, the very same year where Angela Merkel talked about we can do it with resettling Syrian refugees who had arrived, you started to see the first anti-immigration and more restrictive immigration legislation emerged less than a year later. So those changes can happen quickly, and they can happen on the ground before the political elite recognize what's happening. The second thing that we see is that it's not just about economic pressure. It's also about a feeling of precarity. So interestingly, when you look at Europe, the people who hold the strongest anti-immigrant views are not actually the poorest. It's the working poor. It's working class people who tend to have some of the strongest anti-immigrant views. It's people who feel they have something to lose and who don't see their children doing better than they are doing and who are concerned about losing what they have economically. So there's a status component to that, not just an economic component. And then the last thing is that we can really see over the last decade in Europe that when polarization occurs on the issue of immigration, when it becomes a partisan issue, when it becomes very politicized, it's not just the party that's doing the politicizing that has the impact, it shifts the entire societal debate, and it moves every political party along with it. And that's really what you're seeing right now. So what works to stop this? Because this is obviously something that is very damaging, and we're not immune to it here in Canada. So just a few things. These are based on research and practice that comes out of Europe and the United States predominantly. The first thing is messages tend to work when they take people's economic concerns seriously. So it is important to know that those economic struggles are real, and acknowledging that goes a long way. Messages about solidarity tend to perform a lot better than messages about empathy or economic benefit. So part of this is because when we focus on harms, it demoralizes people, it demobilizes people, and it doesn't provide necessarily a path for action. And when we talk about economic benefit, it's true that immigration brings huge economic benefit. But for a lot of people, if they don't feel like they are getting ahead in this economy, it doesn't necessarily resonate as much with them. but ideas about working together to better everybody's conditions do resonate better. Shared values, so even people who hold anti-immigration bias do tend to connect better on shared values of hard work, family values, fairness, and that can be a place to begin. And naming what's happening is very, very effective. So we can't let politicians divide us, and naming a villain other than immigrant communities is very important. So in this case, in Canada, we can see that it can be employers looking for weaker labor protections, trying to pay people less across the board. It can be governments that let businesses depend on those kinds of exploitative relationships rather than strengthening rights for everybody. And that can be very effective in disarming some of those arguments. And then lastly, focusing on outcomes, not process. So this is a really big one. Our immigration system is incredibly complex, and most Canadians who are born in Canada have very little exposure to it or understanding of it. They see stories about huge increases in temporary immigrants, and they understand that to be something that's impacting the entire immigration system. So they don't make a distinction between temporary workers or students and permanent economic immigrants or refugees. So they understand generally the situation as it's lived in their own lives, as they see impacts on housing, as they see impacts on employment. So when we're trying to reach those people, speaking to them about their lived experience as a point of departure tends to be a lot more effective than going into process with them. So generally, I hope that this is helpful in terms of kicking off a conversation about how to rebuild some of the consensus that we have historically enjoyed in Canada, because it's so important. We can see in Europe what happens if that's allowed to fracture over a long period, and that's not where we want to go. Thank you.
Thanks to you both. Challenging times that we are in. So remember I said that we're going to throw a couple of questions out to you in the room. Each of your tables, you have about 10 minutes to have a conversation amongst yourselves. And then, if you wish, from your table to approach one of the microphones and speak to all of us. This is part of, as we said, a connecting one-to-one and how we begin to mobilize with everyone coming together individually within community. And also the stickies that are at your table, if you want to write something on those stickies, please put them on the flip charts that are here. And then we'll open the conversation across the room and see how it goes from there. We're going to be playing jazz a little bit. So, and for me, that's fun. You see my hat, pork pie hat. It's perfect timing. So the first question I want to put out there is, how can we reimagine systems of support individually within our communities to not only alleviate poverty, but also address the root causes of backlash, whether it's against equity issues, immigrant settlement, anti-racism issues, and so on and so forth. And how do we do that together? And I'm going to keep coming back to the together part as much as possible. And then, based on what we're seeing globally, what are some of the things that are important for us to understand as we take these issues on in our community? I read a lot of news in the morning, and it's always reading headlines and seeing, someone south of the border is now saying white South Afrikaners are the refugee targets, right? And I'm just wondering how that filters up here when we've had such a major cuts to immigrant settlement over the previous government under Trudeau and under this current government. I mean, what is that in the atmosphere that suggests something? So what can we do about those? How do we understand those global changes and how it has an impact on us here? And how do we defend against it? What can we say that says, not in our backyard in essence, and here's why? The third, of course, and part of everyone is, what actions do we need to take as community organizers, as service providers, as advocates, as policymakers to bring about changes, or to actually stop the trends that are happening and to move us into a much more secure and comfortable space, if we can call it that, a progressive space. So if that's okay, we have 10 minutes. We'll mind the watch. and call you back or have you come to the microphones, as I said earlier, and we'll go from there. So on you right now. Have fun at your tables. Hi, folks. Just 1 minute. Some people have asked for the questions to be repeated and to be...
Consensus in the room.
Okay. One at a time, yep. So we're going to do them one at a time, and then I'll give you a couple of minutes on the first question, and then we'll come back to the second. We're getting a lot of good facilitation in this room. See, we're already working together. So the first question, how can we rebuild systems of support to not only alleviate poverty, but address the root causes of backlash? Okay? Again, how can we reimagine systems of support to alleviate poverty and address root causes of the backlash we're experiencing? That's question one. You get a couple of minutes on that. Hi, folks. Sounds like the conversations are going very well. Can I just get your attention for a second so we can move to the second question? What time do we have? Okay. Hello? Hi. No, you don't want me to sing. My son, he can sing. I can't. Hi, folks. We want to move on to the second question. So, for our second question, and we're just going to leave it at 2 questions so we can get a real conversation in the room, because I think the third question is about what do we do? And that is part of each question, I think. So based on what we're seeing, what are the things that are important for us to understand about these connections? We were just talking at the table about income insecurity, the precarity that people feel with not knowing, we're in an uncertain time. These tariff wars, the change in governments and so on and so forth, the increasing anti-immigrant sentiment and so on. What are things that we need to understand to be able to challenge these more so, particularly around the economic insecurity that people are feeling? I always remember the Facebook, you've probably all seen this one, of the financial oligarch, with a big pie around him, and there's one piece of the pie over there, and it's an immigrant standing next to it, and he points to the sort of, well, we'll say it's a white guy, and says, that immigrant's stealing your job. So how do we begin to deal with that? Because we know that has been around for quite some time, this notion that they come and they take Canadian jobs and so on and so forth. How do we begin to address that with people who are feeling very insecure about their position, not because of immigrants, but because of the guy who's holding on to the pie, blaming immigrants? So we'll give you a few more minutes on that one, if that's okay. How do we address the economic insecurity that people are feeling and blaming immigrants for? That might be the easier way to put the question. And what actions can we take to address that? It's amazing, there's all this stuff around. You see some of the... Hi, folks. Maybe if I threaten to sing, that will help, right? Hi, everyone. Lovely to hear all the table conversations. How old are your kids? Hi, everyone. Hi. All right. Let's hear some of you tell us what is going on. There are microphones around the room. Please use one. And what I would ask is, hi again. Ooh, that sounds so good. I would ask whichever table wants, please rise, use the microphone, rise up, right? And say what your table is thinking to either the first or the second question, remembering what actions can we take? What, as a community of people working in solidarity to bring about important changes at this time? So who wants to go first? Just line up at the microphone and we'll go one at a time. Don't be shy.
No wrong answers.
Yeah. We really want to hear things. So, we have someone rising to speak. Excellent. Oh my.
You didn't have to do that, but
If you
thank
can say your name and organization.
My name is Mohammed. I'm from the Sioux Community Care Center, Sault Ste. Marie, Northern Ontario.
Okay.
So I will combine both the answers together.
Good.
So I think how can we rebuild the systems that can really help with this is to understand the root of the problem. And when we talk about the poverty, I think we really need to understand what poverty is and to maybe look at it or like meeting these clients that we're serving where they are at, not where we want them to be. So I was telling the colleagues on the table that we just attended a training called Bridges Out of Poverty weeks ago. And for that one, as settlement agencies, we try to support clients to integrate and to overcome these challenges. We are kind of a middle class. I'm not gonna like generalize, but we are very achievement oriented. We talk about the long-term goals. What is your plan for the next month? What's your plan for 5 years from now? And this is what we believe that we're really supporting our clients get out of the poverty. Well, the problem is that we're not speaking the same language because they are in a survival mode. So their biggest concerns or challenges, like how can I feed my children now? How can I take the bus to that appointment? We don't really see these things. So I think to be able to support them better, we have to understand what poverty is, and we have to understand the challenges that they are facing. And that in that training, we have been told that there is a book called, the name of the book is Bridges Out of Poverty. I think I really recommend everyone to read that one. If you can get this training, I think it's very helpful. That's one thing. The other thing is to understand also the problem. When we talk about poverty, we only, somehow we focus on the financial, which is again, I know that it's the biggest challenge, but also we have to understand the capital resources that we have. We have to focus on the social connections, the network, the mental related issues that they are facing, the spiritual. Do they really have the knowledge about the community resources that they can get in order to overcome these problems? So again, maybe just to meet them where they really are at and to understand the root of the problem. And I think we can work stronger. We are stronger together. I think as partners in the community, we have to talk to each other to build some systems that really look into the root of the problem and have an action to start really working where they are at so that we can go with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a couple of comments online that I'd like to read because I think they do dovetail very well to what Mohammed has just said. This conversation is reminding the person that poverty is not simply a lack of income, it's the visible symptom of invisible systems that fail to protect, include, and uplift. We cannot keep responding to poverty with fragmented solutions or emergency aid and expect transformation. The question isn't only how to help the poor, but how to stop producing poverty in the first place. Imagine instead a system built around human dignity, integration, and empowerment. And someone simply followed up with that is, how do we look at the connections between services and organizations so that we can begin to look at the links between housing, mental health, training, and financial stability and how they connect with each other? Another table? Okay. Traffic jam getting to the mic.
Hi, everyone. My name's Megan, and I'm from Northwest London Resource Centre in London, Ontario. Our lovely table over here. I put them on sticky notes so that I can go through them in order. I won't forget my points. So first is awareness. So trainings, billboards, stopping microaggressions, so ways to do that. Anti-hate campaigns. Putting out simple data. So seeing the data today really helped with being able to bring this up in the future, as well as showing actual numbers and facts. So real data and simplifying it for everyone, just because we understand it in this room here today, because we're looking at it a lot, doesn't mean everyone does. Myth busting, educating the unions and the employers as well. Not limiting these discussions, so having these discussions outside of this room with many different people. They're challenging conversations, but we need to have them. And having these conversations with service providers, policymakers, residents, community members. And then uncovering any hidden biases and calling those out. Those go along with those microaggressions as well. And then advocacy through social media. We all spend quite a bit of time on social media, and we see a lot of biases there too. So calling those out and still having those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Another table, please. Or let me ask either, oh, sorry, there's someone, okay.
Good morning. I'm Christy Ann. I'm the Executive Director of Kingston Literacy and Skills. We've talked a lot at our table and even over the last 2 days about storytelling. So this was something that we really focused on, and one of the sessions yesterday by Wood Green really presented a statistic that I'm going to take away as a big learning for myself for the last 2 days, was talking about that the narrative of empathy is actually less impactful than I would have believed. That focusing very, very much on empathy, I think particularly in this time in climate and environment with economic uncertainty, is not necessarily getting us the traction that we would think. You know, if everyone is feeling worn out and everyone is struggling, presenting a story of empathy is possibly going to just produce an attitude of, yeah, me too. So what? You know, what's the point? So I think that something when we were talking about addressing the root causes of backlash or what can we do is thinking much more about our power of storytelling and as storytellers. What are we trying to present in terms of that narrative and really understanding more about the frame? You know, we have amazing stories of our own journeys, our clients' successes. What is the best way for us to be able to share and frame that story? What semantics work in the current climate to be able to get people to understand? And with that, focusing perhaps a little bit less on our outputs versus our outcomes. And I know that those two terms were very critical in the recent contribution agreement discussions and the applications that we did, even though they're still written very much in terms of outputs. You know, as a language providing center, we do this many classes and this many seats and this many hours. But as providers, thinking more in terms of how we sell what we do to those who are perhaps critical in terms of outcomes, not just that I run this many language classes for this many, because I've perhaps opened myself up to criticism from those who go, well, how much does that cost us? How much money goes into that? Is it free? It's not really free, is it? And I've created that challenge for myself in not selling the story correctly. Perhaps understanding more about how we get people to understand by discussing the outcomes of what we do instead of just the daily actions that we all know are part of what we do every day.
Thank you. Anyone else? Someone coming.
Hello, my name is Tanya. I'm from OCASI, and my beautiful table is at the back. I'm going to do my best with my sticky notes.
Can you talk closer to the microphone?
Sorry. So I don't know if we answered your questions, but we had a great discussion. But I think one of the first things that we sort of premised our discussion on is the reality of Canada's history of bringing in immigrants as a force of cheap labor, right? And bringing them in, using them, exploiting them, often deporting them, or then criminalizing them for staying, right? And so there's this historical analysis that needs to be part of our discussion, but also part of the ways that we hold the state accountable in the ways that it continues to do so, and how that becomes part of the dynamics that, or is part of the dynamic that creates racism against immigrants, right? We also talked about, and this came up in a session that I was at yesterday, is racism within immigrant communities themselves, where we see some of us who might have been here longer, right, or who have citizenship, having racist attitudes or interactions with newer people who are newer to Canada, or based on their status or based on how they came to Canada. And so one of the things that was discussed was the importance of solidarity across our communities, across certainly the work that we do, but also, you know, the beginning of sort of starting from home, starting from ourselves, and account, sort of dialing into our own biases, and also sort of confronting that and confronting the people within our own lives, or the situations or interactions that we may see in our own lives on a daily basis. Because we had stories amongst ourselves where it was not sort of singular. It was a common experience. Is that good? I think that was everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. And I'm just pulling myself together for the courage to be speaking in front of a crowd. They tell me I'm good in public speaking, but I still kind of need to get this confident. So I'm Rola Al-Mubadder, and I am the program manager at Care Center for Internationally Educated Nurses. And I am an IEN myself who went through the journey as an immigrant. And this is the storytelling, and this is the power of empathy and telling the stories of other fellow IANs and other fellow immigrants. So the dream of going to a new country, to establish a new life, a new career, that was me when I packed my bag, 1999, to another country, from my home country, Lebanon, to United Arab Emirates. And then I thought I need home. So Canada was my home and is my home and will be my home for my kids and my grandkids. And I told my boys, this is a joke. You're gonna marry someone who's here. I didn't pay the price of being here, of my life, my journey, for you to go somewhere else. So you have to build your life here. As a grandmother, I wanna be around my kids, children. Sorry. So this is me. Okay, I'm sorry. So, why we're here? Because again, we want to be part of the system. We don't want to be burdened to the system as immigrants. We want to contribute. We want to have the stability, the economical stability, the social stability, the emotional stability. And if we don't have all those great people around the room doing what we're doing every day, we will not be empowering those immigrants to settle and to be really contributing to our economy. So you see me holding this book in my hand. It's my accomplishment, our team accomplishment, our organization accomplishment, Care Center for Internationally Educated Nurses. Voicing this to the world, the journey of integration of IENs across countries. Because it's not only Canada who's dealing with immigrants. Europe as well is dealing with immigrants. Our neighbors are dealing with immigrants. We brought those co-authors from across the globe to speak. So if people will actually argue in other countries, oh, they don't have actually settlement organizations. Well, I was in Finland this summer in Europe, and I was telling the group in my table, thank you so much, because they encouraged me and they said, you have to go and be there and speak out of everything. So the taxi driver who took me from the hotel to the conference, the International Conference of Nurses, he's an immigrant from African descent. And it was breaking. He's an engineer. And what he said is like, I've been in Finland for 7 years, and I haven't been able to work as an engineer. All what I do is I send money back home for my family so I can be there one day with them to live our life and enjoy it. So the sense of belonging is so important, and this is what we need to create. If I don't have this sense of belonging, I wouldn't be standing here. I would packed 2 days after I arrived to Canada, but I had the persistence, the perseverance, and I started to build community and network and sense of belonging. And thank you to Care Center for Internationally Educated Nurses who were part of my journey and still, and I'm doing the same for other IENs through my role. So this is the story, this is the empathy, this is what we have to keep in mind. And thank you. You can actually find this book anywhere online. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we did see someone on this side of the room. Go right ahead. If you're at the microphone now. No? You coming to speak? Yes. Okay. Thank you. There's a light right in my face. That's right. Like I'm on stage. Well, I am.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just sharing some thoughts, especially after the internationally educated nurses discussion here. I feel, looking at the data that you shared, Jordan, it's very interesting that while we do talk about conservatives at 82% anti-immigration sentiment, I also felt that if we were to look at the other parties, whether it's the Bloc Québécois or whether it's the Greens or whether it's the Liberals, they're either 42, 45% or more than 50% who are anti-immigrant. So the sentiment, I feel, would probably have changed even for them in the last few years significantly. The reason I'm saying this is to highlight that it's not just one political party, but across the board, the sentiment is going against immigrants. And on a table we were discussing earlier today that one reason, to go to the second question, one reason why there is a lot of economic insecurity amongst people is the people who've been living here for a longer time and they're seeing rising costs, rising everything, even calling up CRA and waiting on the line for 2 hours, calling up Service Canada, driving license, you cannot get the tests done, booked immediately in the next few days. Hospital wait times, emergency wait times, 8 hours, 12 hours. So I come from a small city up north, North Bay, and I've seen there how in the last few years, a different color collage of people has come in, which is more than what it was previously. And not just coincided, but ever since COVID, this idea of emergency wait times has just kept on increasing. So the easiest thing for somebody living there is to blame some new looking person there and say that, oh, it's because of them that this is happening. Ironically, though, the qualified immigrants who are coming in, we have internationally educated nurses, we have doctors, engineers, dentists. We bring them sometimes even on express entry, and then we don't have jobs for them. And I work with immigrants, qualified immigrants, who come in and say, I came here on express entry. You guys needed my skills. And when I come here, I take 3, 4, 5 years struggling to first be educated. I'm a dentist, I have to pay $200,000 to get qualified as a dentist here. Why did you give me a visa if I don't have $200,000 to spend? So I'm working as a dental hygienist, I'm working as something else in dental stuff, which I don't know myself. and so on and so forth. There are engineers. Our mining industry up north needs engineers. We don't have engineers. I have like 12 engineers in my portfolio. They can't find a job because they need professional engineer certification. And they've all come on express entry. So the reason I'm sharing all this is ironically, we are turning against immigrants, even though there are quite a few of them who've come in here because we invited them. We voted for the parties who would invite those people to come here. And then we don't have any way of integrating them into our jobs that we need for them to perform. So my view, I think, while it is good to have some narratives, hoardings, billboards, whatnot, but I'm also a firm believer, not a firm believer, but I do feel that confirmation bias does play a very strong role. So if the government, and if I'm with the government, whether they publish any data or don't, I will still believe them. If I'm against them, no matter what data they publish, I'll say they're lying. I don't believe this data. So it's like a catch-22, we don't know what to do. And to that, my submission is that as a group, if we can all start advocating for and communicating about doing something, anything to improve the wait times at the hospitals, or can CRA take not more than 10 minutes to answer calls, for example? And we have so many people, why are they not getting hired? It is publicly funded organizations. All of them are publicly funded. Let's have budgets for them to hire more people. Let's expedite nurses to be accepted through these courses. Let's expedite doctors to come in. There are doctors driving Uber in GTA. Why are they driving Uber? Why can we not have some quick qualifying something? Reason I'm explaining this in detail is, imagine if in the next year, with a targeted timeline, within a year or 2 years, the same citizens of Canada, when they start going to a hospital and they say, oh, there's no emergency time here. Emergency is emergency. That's because we've hired a lot of immigrants. You see different colors of skin, doctors, dentists and nurses. And then you know these immigrants are really benefiting us. What we are seeing is the wait times are increasing, and we see Tim Hortons with a bunch of non-Canadian, for politically correctly way I'm saying, that you go and they don't know what's a double-double, and they are manning Tim Hortons. So these are the people stealing our jobs, but that's not really true. Those are international students probably who've come in for a temporary job and they're going to go away. So if in concrete terms we are able to drive strategies, help change policies so that the citizens of Canada and permanent residents can tangibly feel some kind of improvement, whether it's in service delivery, whether it's in hospitals, building quicker, doing repairs quicker. Like I used to say, lots of people would say Toronto has got 2 seasons, either it's winter or it's repairs and construction. So it's perennially, the moment spring starts until autumn, it's always construction somewhere or the other. And if we are able to bring in more immigrants, we can assimilate them better. That will change the narrative more than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's an excellent segue to a comment we have online. And I can preface it. I'll ask the 2 speakers to give some final comments to this as well. We're not responsible for food prices. We're not responsible for housing prices. We're not responsible for, in terms of control of the health services, of academics, and so on. These are set by others. We're not responsible for how interest rates are set, which has an impact upon housing and so on and so forth. So how do we hold government and business to account? Because they are the ones who are doing this. And as we've heard throughout the room and from the 2 speakers, they are blaming immigrants for that problem. My God, as if immigrants controlled housing costs, as if immigrants controlled health services and the provision of monies toward health services and so on. So I'll start with, this time with you. Oh. No, we'll start with Jordan this time. You weren't first last time.
Okay. Thank you so much for all of those comments. I think they really illustrate the diversity of challenges that there are on this. And what I would say, and I think this goes back to what one of the earlier speakers said, we have to meet people where they're at. And the most effective way to confront and change government opinion is to confront and change public opinion. that is always the leading indicator in political decision making. So part of what works and what could be a bit of the solution is making sure that we're talking about how the struggles of immigration and integration are intertwined with struggles to provide better services for all people in Canada, to make sure that people have better wages, to make sure that everybody has an affordable cost of living. And I think the example of healthcare workers is a really good one. It's not just a story about the need for qualified people to have the jobs that they were promised when they came to Canada. It's also a story of our hospitals who can't serve people in our communities because they don't have enough staff. So it's telling that whole story in a way that shows how those struggles are really interconnected. That is probably one of the most effective ways of shifting public opinion on this topic. The other thing I would say, I think it was really important what was mentioned by one of the other commenters about divides within immigrant communities as well. And so when we look at why political rhetoric on immigration has changed in Canada, for many years there was almost a protection around this issue. Immigrants are a large voting bloc in Canada, so no party really had an incentive to engage in that kind of rhetoric because those are voters. And in Canada, we have a relatively short period between when you come to Canada and when you would be able to vote, right? But what's changed is that there has been a recognition that there is different opinions even within that block of voters about immigration processes. And that may be people who have arrived earlier, who hold opinions about people who are more recently arrived immigrants, or who hold opinions about people based on their method of arrival in Canada. And so that's where you start to see rhetoric like, we followed the rules and other people are jumping the queue. And that is an attempt to divide people within immigrant communities as well. And so that's also something that has to be really named and resisted in order to shift public opinion and shift what is politically acceptable in our discourse. And the last thing I would say is that I think there's a lot of value in finding unexpected allies in this work. So in Canada, one of the most successful recent pilot projects that's happened around regularization of undocumented workers in Canada actually happened in the most blue-collar, white dude environment imaginable. It was in the construction trades. And there was success in that program because the Canadian-born workers on those construction sites thought that their colleagues who were undocumented showed up every day, they worked very hard, they were there for the same values and the same reasons that they were to provide for their families, and they didn't think it was fair that these colleagues could be hauled off by CBSA at any moment. And so that solidarity that was created between those two unlikely groups of workers was very powerful and actually led to successful regularization processes in an incredibly hostile political environment. So making sure that when we're talking about these issues and we're talking about solidarity, not just empathy, not just economic benefit, that we're speaking to people who are not in this room. We're speaking to people who don't already agree about the value of immigration or who don't understand it in a nuanced way, in a way that is relatable to them, is, in my view, the special sauce of shifting public opinion, which in turn will shift what is politically acceptable in Canada.
Thank you very much. The question was, it started off by saying we're not responsible, right? We're not responsible for these things that are happening to us by government, public policy, decisions, legislation. We have to take responsibility. We can't just throw our hands up and say, that is happening there and what can we do? Yeah, these problems are massive. They're huge, they're ingrained. But we have a responsibility. The reason I go to work every day is not because I think I'm going to see child poverty eradicated in my lifetime, but it's because I wouldn't be able to go to bed at night with myself if I didn't try to make a change. I have 3 teenagers. And I am also trying to get them engaged. And, it's for the generations out. We know Indigenous knowledge keepers and Indigenous communities, they think 7 generations behind us and 7 generations ahead. What are we leaving for people, for the generations to come? We all have a responsibility. And I think that folks in the room get it. Every comment that I heard was these incredible suggestions and ideas of how we can shift and make change. And it's those ripples. We do one thing, 2 things, and they will have these ripple effects over time. So I'm not worried. I actually feel a lot of hope right now. I do think that there is a lot of power in the narrative and the narrative framing that I've just been hearing this theme come up. So the right and right-wing machinery invests a lot of money, like probably more money than all of our services combined have. They are investing into creating these very powerful narrative frames that poverty is inevitable, that we have to have 5% of unemployment for the economy to work, there are these really powerful messages that are being invested into. So we do need to work together to create our own narrative frames. There is a lot of power in sharing our stories and talking about poverty as a social construct, about immigration and division as social constructs. Major changes, transformative changes, don't happen with government decision makers. They are one target of our advocacy work, but big changes, transformational changes happen in community. They happen when we come together, and they happen when we have our collective voice and push for change. It's something that we've been doing at Family Service Toronto and Campaign 2000. This year we worked on extending our reach outside of the folks who we usually talk to around child and family poverty, and we reached out to folks across the sectors. OCASI was at the table. We brought together 45 organizations and had a discussion, an online national dialogue on Friday, which was the United Nations International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. It was a collective effort with 45 diverse organizations who organized it, and over 270 people showed up. Though there is power in those moments, in these community building moments, in exactly what we are doing here today. So I think that we all have a responsibility. We can all move from this precarity mindset to a mindset of abundance. There is enough wealth. There is enough space, there is enough room for everybody, and really to advance that principle of leaving no one behind. We can't do this work and do it for ourselves or just our agency. We can't leave anybody behind. So that would be my response. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Leila. This has been quite exciting program. I think we're having a health break between now and Debbie's going to come up and orchestrate the next phase of our engagement today. Let's get out there and do the work. That's what's in front of us. Thank you again.
Thank you. Another hand for our panelists, Jordan, Leila, and our moderator, Charles. Checkout is at 11. If you haven't checked out yet, please check out. Go outside and grab some fresh air on your way to your panel. Visit the marketplace. Remember to complete the survey of this panel. Please, evaluation. What else am I forgetting? Do the surveys that are on your table. There's a mental health survey. There's a NARS survey. Do your evaluation. Your concurrent session starts at 9:45. And Jordan, I got an email saying that I needed to let you know that OCASI is your biggest fan base for the show with Hurley. So I'm passing on the message for those online who wanted me to share that. There you go. Thank you all.